the other thing, we were talking about the war, right? One of the things that people can do, and I recommend it, especially if you're in the UK, go to bit.ly/makewarhistory. It is a criminal offense to pay any money to government, local or central, directly or indirectly, if any of those proceeds are going to be used to support what's happening in Israel, to carry on the bombing of Yemen, and to support the Ukraine-Russia war in any way, to fund it, facilitate it. It is a criminal offense, and that's laid out in the International Criminal Court Act 2001 and the Terrorism Act 2000. And what you can do from the bit.ly/makewarhistory is you download a very simple to complete trust form. It's easy to complete, it's completely free, which says to the receiving agency, you can have these funds provided you can ensure full compliance with these statutes, because it's a criminal offense otherwise for you and for me. So I invite people to go and do that. I've done that successfully with HMRC, and as far as Probity Code know, no one who's used this process with HMRC has been threatened with court action.
Using Wi-Fi without NordVPN could mean sharing your private stuff with more people than you think. NordVPN. Online security starts with a click.
The United Kingdom. Let's talk about the United Kingdom.
About
Let's start with, just like we did with Trump, all the good things that Starmer has done.
This is going to be a really short conversation, isn't it?
Okay. Now, what has he done that's not great? Where do we begin?
Did you say time was an issue?
Oh my God. He is the worst. I think he may even trump Tony Blair in his venality.
Yeah, at least Tony Blair had charisma. At least Tony Blair had something about him, you know.
He did a few things that were good, I suppose.
Yeah.
So let's start. So one is the assisted murder bill.
It's not they're calling it the assisting dying bill. No. It's calling we don't give a shit about old people, so we're going to give them an option to kill themselves because it's costing the NHS too much money.
Yeah, and there aren't going to be sufficient safeguards. And it's just horrific, absolutely horrific. And the way that it's in the committee stage, this bill right now, and the way that the experts for the committee giving evidence for the committee have been manipulated, so it's all people who are pro that. Very little in terms of opposition, including the exclusion of someone from Canada to talk about the Canadian experience. And I said earlier on that what happens with government is it takes on more and more power for itself. So what's happened in Canada, where it was like a very small cohort of people that qualified for assisted murder, that cohort has increased. So more and more people are qualifying to be murdered by the state. So they said, we're not going to hear from the Canadian example. And the same thing's happening in Netherlands and Belgium and other places where they've put these laws into effect. So that's one. It's horrific. Government should be taking care of people, not making it easier for people to be murdered by state-appointed or state-sanctioned officials. Not at all.
You know when you put your dog down, what is it called?
I don't know.
Euthanasia, right?
Yeah. Well, it's murder, isn't it?
It's murder, right? You put your dog down. So why is it when you kill your mom, you've assisted her dying? No, you've put her down. You've put down your gran because she was costing the NHS too much money. Essentially, that's all it is. There's a great NHS doctor called Dr. Bob Gill. He did a brilliant documentary called The Great NHS Heist a few years ago. It's on YouTube. You can go and watch it. I suggest everybody does. And he's an activist and campaigner for the NHS as well as being a GP. And I covered a speech that he did in Blackburn, a talk that he did at Blackburn a few months ago. And the way that the NHS has been shipping it off piece by piece to corporations over the last 10 years. He's been talking about incessantly. But anyway, I digress. He was basically saying to me that the way a dog's life works, he came up in conversation. He wasn't making this comparison. I sort of made it, and then he went, "Careful, Gordon." But he basically said a person doesn't really need much medical attention throughout their life if they're lucky. The average person doesn't. It's only in the last few years of a person's life that they need the medical help because obviously they're getting older and their body's falling apart. And this is people who have paid into the system their whole lives, with national insurance contributions and tax, etc., etc. And then it comes to the end, and that last final period of life is what costs the NHS. That's what costs money. The money you need, the medical attention when you're alive. And I said to him, so it's like a dog then, isn't it? I said, so when you've got a dog, like chances are that nothing's really going to go wrong with it until unless it gets run over or gets in an accident or anything like that. I said, but then later on in life, it costs you a fortune. That's why that you can't insure a dog who's 10 years old. You need to insure it when it's like 2, and insure it for 8 years to actually get. I said it's like that, isn't it? It costs a fortune at the end, so that's why you put a dog down and he went, careful, Gordon, because that's the way they think.
That is the way they think. That's right.
And it clicked with me. I was like, they want to put people down because it's costing too much money.
They do. They can't afford the pension bill anymore.
And that's what it is.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that. And this is why they put free language on it, like assisted dying, because they know if they called it euthanasia or they called it putting down your granny, nobody would be interested in doing it.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, let's rattle through some of the things that he's done that are bad for Britain. So one is VAT on private schools, and because that will make it harder for low-income, middle-class families send their kids to private school, and that ties in with the Children and Wellbeing Bill, which is an assault on home education and educational freedom. And what both of those does, the net effect of both of that is to centralize education, to allow the government to impose what needs to be taught in schools to children, to more and more children, so we can't escape the incoming sexualization agenda that Keir Starmer's going to be bringing in. And I say this from looking at what's happening in Ireland, and that Keir Starmer is answerable to the same people that the Irish government is answerable to. That's what that's about. And also it means that the home educated children and private school children can't escape the trans agenda that's going to be coming through into schools, or the assault on Christianity that's going to be coming into schools. So that's one. Then another one is giving lots and lots of money to Zelensky, taking it out of pensioners' pockets.
100 years!
100 years!
100 years!
Ukraine's going to be around for 100 years. But the background to that is Britain's historical antipathy and hostility with Russia. The British Empire has never managed to get its hand on the richest resource country in the world, right? So he's answerable to the remnants of British Empire. And I refer people to Richard Poe's book, How the British Invented Communism and Blamed It on the Jews. So there's that. Then there's the assault on free speech, the online speech bill, which they're going to strengthen. And I saw something, I don't know if it was Jim Ferguson or David Curtin that tweeted this out, that the government's looking at a proposal to stop people looking at far-right websites.
Yes. I was actually going to talk about this. They're actually going to well, it's so Orwellian what they're doing. They're going to basically criminalise people who they say are far right, which is who's your class as far right? Because according to your criteria, I'm far right because I go to the gym.
I'm far right because I didn't have those injections. I'm far right. Do you know what? And I'm sure I've said this to you before. I'm a far right white supremacist because I don't believe in open borders.
Yeah, it's far right to actually think that.
Yeah. To actually think, a nation should have a control over its own borders and be able to vet who goes in and out.
Well,
right?
because it is, of course, it's such a binary. It's a binary thing, isn't it? Either you are for open borders or you're against them. There's no nuance. There's nothing to talk about in between. There's just divide one camp versus another. There you go.
All right. Yeah. So there's that. Then there's the the whole thing about the Pakistani rape gangs. And you and I haven't spoken about this before, and I don't know if you watch any of my videos, right? But I'm really, really clear that these Pakistani men that committed these crimes, it was an organized racket. It was an enterprise. These were crimes of sex, crimes of class, and crimes of race. These men thought that these white girls was nothing, and white boys, some of them, was nothing but scum. It was a racist crime. The fact that they're not going to investigate this, and then what I've had to deal with and seen online and put is the racist right using this to fuel Islamophobia and racism and xenophobia. And on the other side, the left, and a few comments from within my own family, in the Pakistani community and Muslim community, it's just charges of racism. And what people are actually ignoring is that this shit happened and these Pakistani men did this and it was organized, and they were allowed to do it because the Labour Party benefited. But if you pull on a string, it goes all the way up.
Okay.
It goes much. That's my speculation. It goes much, much higher.
Okay.
People turned a blind eye to this horrific activity.
Did they get prosecuted?
Some of them did.
Okay.
And it went on for ages and ages and ages.
See, the thing is, right, they've made a big deal about Angela Rayner not doing the investigation into this. This is the gang, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's fueled by a lot of this media speculation, this media furore surrounding this is fueled by Elon Musk's tweets.
Mm-hmm.
We have to remember that the problem in this country, we haven't got a problem in this country with Pakistani grooming and rape gangs, right? We've got a problem in this country, and with your job, you will know the statistics, mate. We've got a problem with a rape and grooming culture. It's not just Pakistani immigrants that are doing it. In fact, calling for an inquiry into these Pakistani rape gangs, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but if some of them got prosecuted and not all, then I suggest that needs to be looked into. However, we don't need a national inquiry on Pakistani rape gangs or rape gangs, in my opinion, at all. And the reason being is we've just had one. We finished in February of 2022. Finished. And the Conservative government was in power then. It lasted 10 years, mate. It started in 2014. Yeah, so it lasted 8 years. It cost millions of pounds. And the 8-year investigation into it, there were hundreds of arrests. There were massive statistics that were gathered as a result of this. And what it found was most of the people that were prosecuted during this 8-year investigation that cost hundreds of millions of pounds were white. The majority of people were white, European people, British people, like me. And if you look at the demographics, the population of who did what, I think it was 87% were white. It was basically, it looked like the demographic of the United Kingdom, to be honest. So demonising one culture and just mentioning one culture, I think, is a trick that the media do to, again, divide you into one camp versus the other. Even you, Rich, when you were explaining it, said the right did this and the left did this. And I'm like thinking, what, so Keir Starmer's the left, is it? Come on. It's like, and immediately you fall in the trap of talking about things through a prism that distorts the information, so the people listening to it is totally bamboozled already, because you're starting off from a false premise in that the other side is the left. They're not. They're both the same side. So that's my opinion on it. It cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It finished in February 2020. The Conservatives sat on the report, which suggested 20 things that need to be done. And I can list these if you want. I won't get into them. But suffice to say, the Conservatives sat on the report for 7 or 8 months before they made a statement about it. They said, we are going to implement 19 of the 20 things. The other thing that we're not going to implement is if a social worker or somebody working with children sees, witnesses, or is told about abuse either by the perpetrator or the victim and say nothing about that to anybody else and don't act on that, that's a crime. And the Conservatives said, no, we don't want you to do that. We don't want you to, we just want to make it so they can't work with children anymore. And it's not a punishable offence. Now, you will have your opinion on that, I'm sure, with your background, mate, as to whether that should be allowed. But that's the one thing that they said they wouldn't. And they were going to implement the other 19 things, like implementing a minister for children, etc., etc. And they were wide-ranging, and this was at the end of a £200 million or whatever it was investigation. Do you know how many of those 20 things have been implemented now, 5 years later?
None.
None.
Yeah.
Not a single one. What's the point of having another investigation if you don't do the shit that the last one did? And that's the reason why we're in this problem right now.
Yeah, Gordon, you make a really valid point, like you always do, right? And I would add, just to complement what you're saying, because I've also heard, and then I want to move on to something else, right? Because I'm conscious of the time. I've also heard that the thing about that it's just so hard to tell what's going on and what's that it goes on with white communities and everything. How much that was made up or whatever, right? In terms of these gangs, and I know it goes on all over the place, all over the world. This sort of activity, and the cost of the inquiries, the delay, the fact that it wouldn't do anything, all valid. I invite you to check out the work of Raja Mir on YouTube. He's a Bengali Muslim, done a lot of great work on this, and it's worth looking into. My assertion is why it's not being looked at is one, because the Labour Party benefited because they got block votes from those communities, but also if you pull on a string, it's the same reason why Epstein hasn't been investigated. You pull on the string.
I was going there, mate.
And it takes us to Cyril Smith, MP for.
I was going there because these kids are being messed about by some pretty powerful people.
That's
I've got
right,
a friend down
right.
in London. I've got a friend down in London who talks about this incessantly, about how certain members of the establishment, very, very well-known people in Britain and the world, are raping children and getting away with it. And we know that they have been doing for decades. So this is, it's got meat to it. We know that we know that there's a problem with it in this country, and we know that nothing's being done about it. So if there's a problem and the establishment have done nothing about it, why?
Yeah. And then the Tories, they're not immune from this either. This is a human thing. Ted Heath, Leon Britton.
Just keep going. And these are just the people who got caught.
Or that we know about. Margaret Thatcher gave Jimmy Savile knighthood.
Peter Mandelson.
Yep.
Come on.
So pulling on a string. That's why, right? So there's that. Then meanwhile, Hugh Edwards, the highest paid reader, gets off with a caution or whatever it was for having thousands of images of child abuse on his laptop or whatever. Meanwhile, people being imprisoned for hurty words. There's what else is Keir Starmer doing? Net zero. We're going to get rid of oil and coal and gas by 2030 and go for net zero. No, you're going to destroy our country. We're going to be destroying farms, the rewilding, which is going to rob us of more agricultural land that's not being taken up by solar farms and wind power. The inheritance tax that's designed to destroy farms, and so they can be brought up by BlackRock, and then there's not enough food because Britain needs to import food anyway, so we'll have to eat the insects from the factories that Bill Gates owns. And then you mentioned about Elon Musk. See, one of the things that I think is going on, I think that Trump is going to war with the remnants of the British Empire that are out to destroy the US. And then Elon Musk, as the attack dog, is out to undermine Keir Starmer. And if the UK and the EU were now to ban, or even to try to ban X, like it's banned in Pakistan and other countries, forget it. The repercussions from the US government would not be pleasant. So I suspect that. So what else is Starmer doing?
Oh, the Palestine thing, mate. I mean, look at their crackdown on those Palestine protesters. Those police were told to do that the weekend, last weekend or whenever it was. They were told to crack heads. I mean, these people were walking past with flowers, and the police started cracking heads and arresting them. They asked people, can you not do this? And Corbyn and the rest of them said, yeah, okay, all right, put their flowers down and walked off. And they still cracked heads. The statement that the Metropolitan Police put out was totally in opposition to the reality on the ground. And you can see that this is from the top, that this change in policing of the Palestinian protests has happened under Starmer, because during the Tories, I went to dozens of the protests, and for the most part, I was highly praising towards the Metropolitan Police, and it was the only time over the past 7 years of me reporting on the police that I was in appraisal of them, because the way that they were policing the Palestinian events, especially with the far right and Zionist agitators who were at the events, was brilliant. And it seems now under Stalin's government that pretext is off, and they've given the police free rein to crack down on free speech and people who, let's remember, are in the streets because they believe that the United Kingdom should uphold international law and their own laws.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's cracking down and cracking heads and sending them to prison. The way that they've cracked down, where he's cracked down on Palestine Action and those activists that are doing damage to the companies that are still in the UK supplying Israel as it is, acting this genocide. The way he's cracked down on these activists and sending them to prison. I mean, there's one girl who was she's 21, and they gave her a 5-year sentence for some criminal damage that she did at one of these drone factories. And she didn't hurt anybody. And they sent her to prison for 5 years for opposing a genocide. She's now on hunger strike, or at least she was. The sweetest girl in the world. Meanwhile, violent rapists are being released onto the streets because they've got no more space in the prisons, because they're putting people this beautiful 21-year-old delightful, peaceful girl in prison for opposing our complicity in genocide. It makes me want to throw up. It really does.
Well, one of the ways people can protest is by going to bit.ly/makewarhistory. Legal tax protest against what this government is doing with regards to Israel, Ukraine, and Yemen, and what MI6 are doing and MI5 are doing all over the place as well. Because it's a violation of International Criminal Court Act and the Terrorism Act, and you don't.
And if anybody out there saying no, we're not hardly sending them any bits, we're hardly sending them any weapons, we're not complicit in the genocide in Israel. No. Yes, we are. Over half of the surveillance planes that have operated in Gaza, according to Declassified UK, are done by the RAF out of Cyprus. We are complicit. We are giving the Israeli information and intelligence for them to murder innocent civilians and babies. And we are complicit, and people need to be held account. And the best way to do that is to withhold your tax from the people who are doing this, remember, with your money.
And then you've got more money to pay for the cost of living increases instigated by this government, because they're printing more money. And what that does, by increasing the money supply, it destroys people's savings. Your savings are worth less because the pound loses purchasing power, and that impoverishes, because all their policies are designed to impoverish us. What other bills are you proposing? The utility bills, water bills going up, all designed to impoverish us, make us poorer. The
15-minute cities.
Oh yeah, well that was a WEF policy, right? That they just
he's a Davos boy. He's the Davos and
that was under the Tories allowing us to do that. Oh, the other thing that the Tories have been doing, and the Labour are going to accelerate, is the devolution process. And several councils have cancelled elections, so they're not going to be answerable to the electorate. Councils going bankrupt. This is being done deliberately, because what Keir Starmer's Labour is going to do is come forward with a proposal. They're going to say the current structures aren't working. We need to reorganize local government, and they're going to put in place non-elected assemblies and elected mayors that is going to be easier to control. It's going to be a massive centralization of power. So it's going to be easier to control from Whitehall about what happens locally. So that's something that they're going to be doing. Closer ties to that fabulous bastion of democracy, the EU. Then banning smoking. I think we may have mentioned this. Banning smoking because Keir Starmer really cares about our health. No, he's banning smoking as an assault on British culture, but also to prevent people convening. Because the thing about pubs is you can hang out with your mates, drink a few beers, and I don't drink, and I don't go to pubs very often, and have surveillance-free conversations where, God forbid, you might exchange far-right ideas, about the injections being harmful. So that's an assault on British culture. That's an assault on small businesses. That's an assault on our ability to congregate. There's a football regulation bill, because the other place where people congregate and talk freely is in large numbers is when they go to football matches. So it's going to allow central government to impose conditions upon football clubs that will eventually lead to the destruction of football as an activity that people engage in, and as a spectator activity, because you can't have people enjoying themselves within a Stalinist country.
What they've done to football in my lifetime is criminal. I used to love it. When I was a kid, when I was growing up, I used to love it. But what successive governments, the way they've handed all the power over to Sky, basically, because Sky have got money. It's at the detriment of football and football players in this country, and most of all the fans, because it's the fans who have to pay for it, have to pay for all this expense. I mean, how they can afford to go to the games now is beyond me. You know, how they can afford to buy a football shirt for £155 is beyond me, especially when that football shirt costs the same price basically as one of these to us. It's all about money. It's all about making money, and it's not about football, and it's certainly not about the fans, because the way they have made it illegal, and this is the government that have done this in this country. The way they have made it illegal, basically, for anybody in this country to watch their football team live at home, unless it's on Sky, is quite frankly criminal. But they'll call you criminal. If you are anywhere else in this world, you can go to a pub and watch any Wolves match. I'm from Wolves. Where's it for you? Is it down south, isn't it? You're from, mate. You can watch any, I don't know, Bournemouth match, Brighton match, any match, anywhere. If you're somewhere else in the world, but you can't do that in the UK. The way they have done that to make sure that all the money gets sucked up by Sky to the detriment. I mean, imagine if Wolves or Bournemouth or Brighton could say, right, you know what? Stuff your money, Sky. You only show 5 of our matches a season anyway. All right? Because we're not a Man United or, you know what? Sod it. Stuff your money. We're going to stream our games ourselves to the internet, and then people from anywhere in the world can tune in for £1 and watch the match. They'd make millions. But because of the government's blinkered thinking and the way they only pound signs, money.
Gordon, it's more than that. It's more than that. This has been a long-term project, I think, driving us towards owning nothing and being happy.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, then they really are 50 steps ahead of everybody, mate.
Well, yes and no, except the whole thing is crumbling because they didn't win Ukraine hasn't defeated Russia. Surprise.
That is over.
Yeah, they didn't lock it down for 10 years as they intended to. Too many people resisted the injections. And now we've got Trump in power who's attacking globalism, undermining globalism. And that's going to have repercussions all over the world.
And also, very few people believe the propaganda anymore. That's a real big thing because it's not working on people anymore.
Yeah, because that takes us to the Southport incident. And we've got to be careful how we speak about that. But the government lied about that. People have, I think more and more people have woken up to the lies, and they dealt it so badly that it's increased, maybe they did it deliberately, increased the division between people, because people of all sides are horrified by what this guy did, but the government covering for it just fuels the schism between people, and then calling just normal, ordinary Britons far right for protesting against this. It's disgusting. And then that person, his father, has ties to Keir Starmer because of the crimes that his father committed in his own country, and Keir Starmer helped him get in here. And then the other thing that the government are doing that's insane is this mass migration, legal and illegal, in the absence of a growing economy. So you have a larger population struggling competing for the same amount of limited, reducing resources. Well, that creates conflict and increases poverty. Cloud pivot strategy, which I did a video on,
about that.
which people can go and watch on my channel. And then what else is?
There's so many. Honestly, it's difficult to list them all, mate. It's like we could be here all day. We really could. Before he was Prime Minister, I said to you, he's going to win, and he's going to be the biggest threat to this country that we've ever faced. And look at it. Look at what he's done. He's not just a Tory. He's not just doing everything the Tories were doing. He's going even further. He's further right than the Tories are now. And yet the media are calling him the left. I'm like, are you kidding me?
But Gordon, you know what happens, right? Fascism and Stalinism just meet. And it's the same structure. Centralized power, centralized wealth, no freedom or liberty for people. Oh, that from the Southport incident, in order to go online to buy knives online, you got to register your identity. Now that's the thin end of the wedge, because what they're also going to bring in order to go online, you're going to have to put in your ID. So it might be useful to get
You've got to put in your ID to go online.
That's in the pipe works, I suspect.
Okay, so this hasn't been done yet, but you
No.
think that's going to happen? They're trying to do that?
I don't know, but that's the direction of travel.
Well, essentially, to get online, you've got to put your ID in anyway, right?
No, don't use a VPN.
Well, but if you go online, they can. If you,
Okay,
I can't even get this. It's so Orwellian. I can't even start the sentence. If you've done nothing wrong, right?
then you've got nothing to worry about, Gordon.
You've got nothing to worry about. This is what they'll say to you, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if we've done nothing wrong, if we've done something wrong, you can investigate us
Yes.
now, and you do. And if we've done something wrong, you can see every web page we've ever looked at, and you do. You've got this written into law. I specifically remember Theresa May putting the law in to say that, yeah, if we want to investigate something, basically we can get their entire history and we can look at every single website that person has looked at for 5 years, I think it was, and the metadata will basically tell us all we need to know. It's not like basically us listening in on every phone call you make. It's just us seeing when you made a phone call. But that's all they pretty much need. And they can do that now. So why do they need to look at what everything you're doing online
They don't
in
need to
real
look at
time?
it. They need to get us trained.
Yeah, it's to
Give
manipulate you.
away our ID so they can begin to track us. And then the other thing that leads us on to is the bill that they're proposing that would allow banks and governments to take money from people's bank accounts to follow their transactions, see what they're doing, and take money from people's bank accounts in the absence of a court order.
And he's also allowed he's going to allow the Department of Work and Pensions to literally reach into your bank account and take the money out of your bank.
Yeah. Now, I'm just looking up something here on my other computer, right? There is a very old law that is still in effect that I found out about since we last recorded. So one is there's the the Bill of Rights, 1688 or 1689, that is still in effect, that Parliament cannot repeal because it created Parliament in its present structure. And what that says is, and we need to know about this stuff and educate ourselves, no fine, fees, or forfeitures without conviction. So you cannot have something taken from you without conviction. That means going to a court and due process. Now, we don't know about this because in the early 70s, and I did a video with the guy who heads the English Constitution Party. I do recommend, Gordon, that you have him on your channel. We don't know about this because in the early 70s, they stopped teaching the British or the English Constitution to lawyers. So Britain is described as a constitutional monarchy.
Yeah, we stopped teaching medicine to doctors.
Britain is a constitutional monarchy, right? We have a monarchy. Well, guess what? We also have a constitution, but we're not taught about it, and lawyers aren't taught about it. And in some respects, the 1688 Bill of Rights is much stronger than the US Bill of Rights. There's also, it's not coming up on my other computer, the 1368 Observation of Due Process, which in Oldie English says someone cannot be convicted of any crime unless they've gone through due process.
It's habeas corpus, isn't it?
This is not habeas corpus.
No?
It is habeas corpus.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
It's not named as that because there's also the Habeas Corpus Act, which I haven't looked at. But the Observation of Due Process, 1368, hasn't been repealed. It's still in effect. And essentially, so there's all these... One of the things that Keir Stalin is out to do is to destroy common law.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see this the way the law. Okay, the way the law is written, it's not set in stone, right?
Some of it is.
Right? No, it's not set in stone. Basically, what you have to do is you have to argue the law in front of a judge who then makes a judgment. But the thing is, right, when it comes to all these old laws, the media and the establishment say, oh, no, that will never work, right?
Or they don't
never get tested. You never make the arguments against this other side. So these laws, because they never get made, the government and the elite and the establishment can say, "Oh yeah, they won't work. Those arguments won't work." That's just typical people who are trying to say one thing. The two things are not related whatsoever. But because those arguments never get actually tested in a court of law, we don't know. And what we're finding is whenever they are get tested, people like probityco.com, people like bit.ly/make war history are finding that actually it's not even getting to court because they know they're going to lose.
Yeah.
And it's the opposite of what we've been told. So the more I'm finding, the more I'm becoming more and more interested about these things. And now, obviously, I've got some time on my hands because what I was doing last year, 75% of my work was for the Julian Assange campaign. Obviously, now that's gone. I can look into it a little bit more. I know you've been talking to me for years, but it's interesting to see how it plays out in a court. Because what I'm finding at the moment, it's not getting to court because they know they're going to lose.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why the bit.ly/makewarhistory is such an effective and so far successful and growing campaign, because we're using legislation, their legislation, our legislation, in order to enforce sanctions against genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and terrorism. And by the way, you can use that process to not pay your BBC license, because some of that money goes towards paying for those activities. All the money government collects goes into a consolidated fund. From there it's dispersed. Same deal with council tax, because that's the other thing that's happened. Council tax, some councils are going to raise their council tax by 25%. Again, part of a deliberate ploy to destroy local democracy and centralize everything. But Keir Stalin, he's hit the rocks. I think what Trump has done in terms of the revolution, American Revolution 2.0, is going to have a knock-on effect in the UK and the European Union. Are people going to be like, wait a minute, we have 100 plus genders here. How come they only have 2 in the United States? They've gone back to having 2, right?
It's not been as bad here as it has elsewhere in the EU, especially. It hasn't been as bad. Fortunately, saner heads to a degree have prevailed. But in Scotland, it was a different story for a while. But the way the Western factions embraced this, and it was all at the behest of, it was all driven by the US culture and the other countries following it. So that switch from Trump is a real positive thing, I believe.
Yep. Okay, Gordon, anything else before we finish up?
I could talk for ages about loads of stuff that I've been looking at, mate. I really could, but I think I better draw under a line under it there.
Sure, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much, and look forward to having you back on again at some point, and me being on your channel, because this is going to go out on both. Links to both in the description below. Comments, questions, and between now and when I see you next, please keep filling your hearts with courage, love, and freedom. Crypto Rich and Crypto Gordon signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes a duty. So said Thomas Jefferson. Go to bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/makewarhistory and find out why it is a criminal offence to pay central government or local government taxes in the UK. bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/makewarhistory.